Vivek Ramaswamy says he wants to cut over 1 million civilian federal employees. We're going to talk about that today here on the Left Wing. My name is Desmond Price of the Independent Thought Podcast, joined by my co-host, TJ Whitehead of Power is Taken, Not Given. So let's put this up on the screen. This is an article from The Hill where Ramaswamy says he wants to cut 1 million civilian jobs. Says that presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy vowed to cut 1 million civilian federal employees from the government if elected to the White House next year. In interviews with Axios, said he wanted to make drastic cuts to the federal government. He listed the FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the Department of Education, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the IRS, the Commerce Department, and the United States Food and Nutritional Services as potential subjects for the cuts. The tech entrepreneur told Axios that he wants to cut the federal civilian workforce, which comprises 2.2 million people, by 75% after 4 years. He added that he wants to see 50% reduction by the end of the first year. So, TJ, this is the question I have for you. Why is it that Vivek and other Republicans are so obsessed with cutting federal jobs, the federal government, and also, why do they never go after the military?
Yes, yeah, that's a great question right there, because whenever they want to cut spending, yeah, you'll notice it won't be in two places. It won't be for the military and it won't be for local police, which isn't federal, I guess, but they would be against it anyway. Like any part of our system that protects capital, they will leave alone. And it's only the parts that actually, make life more pleasant and safer for the populace that they seem to have a problem with. Like, watch them talk about, how we really need to start looking at decreasing Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. That's kind of getting out of hand. And you see all these people on food stamps. I mean, like that really, burns their bacon. But it's ever since it predates Ronald Reagan, but remember when Ronald Reagan said, I mean, not remember it, but he did say this.
I wasn't there, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. I was there for that. But Ronald Reagan did say, like, the worst sentence in the English language is, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
And they purposefully say, "I'm going to run for office in the government, and my primary goal is to dismantle the government." It makes no sense at all. And they work to just destroy everything they can and make it as inefficient as possible. So they're like, oh yeah, government doesn't work. Maybe we should get rid of it. Like, that's the plan the entire time.
You basically are running on government is broken, and then when you get in office, you have to be terrible to prove the original premise. Like, it must be great to be able to do that. This government doesn't work, and by me not funding it and breaking it, see what I told you? Keep me in power.
And like you said, it's always the same targets. It's the Department of Education, the IRS, the EPA, the FDA. So just like stuff that makes life better for people. And the FBI, though, the FBI is interesting because that one's new. They've never gone after the FBI before. We all know why they are now, though. And I guess and what's really disingenuous about it is they're now
on abolishing the police.
Say what?
Their stance on abolishing the police.
Oh, well, I was going to say that they're now using the talking points we've been using for years and acting like they've always believed it. Like, well, the FBI spied on Martin Luther King, right? So you guys never gave a fuck about that before. You didn't give a damn that they were spying about Martin Luther King. And now you're like, oh, see, we're right. We gotta get rid of it. Like, no, you're only after the FBI because they went after Trump. That's it. That's the only reason. And Vivek talking about how, I love the interview when I think it was Chuck Todd, and is asking Vivek, hey, so you want to get rid of the FBI? I mean, like, the FBI, it has problems, but it does some pretty important work, going after, interstate crimes and murders and stuff like that. And Ramaswamy says, well, I don't want to destroy the FBI. I want to replace the FBI with something better. which is like, you want to replace it with your FBI. Like, that's it. Like, you're not going to actually change the apparatus. You're just going to like bend it to your will so it doesn't go after Republicans. Everything about the philosophy is just vapid and nonsensical. And it is bewildering to me that the Republican Party for the last 60 years or so is hell-bent on returning our modern society to this pre-industrial agrarian society that existed in the 1840s. It's impossible. It can't work. And it's like, well, you know, listen, if we don't need health inspectors looking at how food is made, I'm sure bakers won't put sawdust in your bread like they did before. The free market will take care of it. And they worship the free market like a god. Like they believe that we exist to serve the economy instead of the economy existing to serve us. Like, that's their entire philosophy. And it's weird, man. Like, and thankfully it's not that popular. Like, thankfully it's not that popular. Like, it's only popular like with like the hard right people. But once it's put into practice, it falls apart. But of course Vivek would do this because he's an insane man.
It is such a standard like Republican orthodoxy talking point. Let's like, we got to cut the government. We have to cut the government. You know, let me give a little bit of credibility to the idea, though. You know, the government as a whole has not been working for the people.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
And because of that, the Republicans always have this credible talking point. Hey, we need to just tear it down. It doesn't work. And you know what? To an extent, it doesn't really work that well for people.
Yeah.
The problem is that the reasons that they want to tear it down is not actually to help people. They want to tear it down because they want to help their friends on Wall Street, in corporate America, have less regulation so that they can operate with even less impunity, as if they really have that much impunity to operate with in the first place. But their goals here aren't truly to improve the lives of people. You know, we see this time and time again. When you're talking about getting rid of Social Security and Medicare, who is that helping? Like, honestly, who does that benefit? You're talking about getting rid of the EPA. Who does that benefit? Who is actually being, you know, like downtrodden upon about the EPA? Who is actually benefiting from like nutritional services being cut? Like what exactly is the goal of that? You know, like you can see tangible benefits for that. And maybe you think to yourself, okay, maybe some of these government agencies are getting a lot of money and they're not producing results. All right, you know what? I could actually buy that. We should be talking about reforming agencies to make sure that there's more transparency, to make sure that there's more accountability, to make sure that funding is being allocated appropriately. Let's talk about government functioning better, but dismantling it makes it seem as though like it has no purpose whatsoever. And that's just not true at all. But again, Vivek, other Republicans, they get away with talking about it like this because of the fact that they're right. In this current form, the government has been essentially functioning like shit. And that does need to change.
Yeah. So that's an excellent point. In fact, it was rolling around in my head. I couldn't find it. Like, I remember I was thinking that's the very same thing, because really, like, the Republican stance is that the government doesn't work. It doesn't do what you want it to do. And that, to a major extent, is true. And so it's funny, like, so remember when Biden, two different times, neither of which did anything, but like at least the sentiment was there, where he said that I'm gonna drop $10,000 of student loan debt and I'm gonna legalize marijuana or whatever.
Yeah.
And you remember Republicans were losing their mind saying, oh, he's just doing this to buy votes. He's just doing something to appease the people. I was like, that's his fucking job.
That's what you all do all the time.
That's what it's like. People are so used to the government not actually doing what we want that when someone does it, they think it's cheating. It's like, no, it's not cheating. Like, this is how the system is supposed to work. But it's, and like, not just Republicans, Democrats do this too. They say that, well, you know, the important thing about being a leader is standing up and being able to make tough proclamations like, I'm sorry, we can't raise these taxes to pay for children's school lunch. It's like, wait, why is that good? Like, why are you happy that you're saying that? How is that the responsible thing to do? So when Republicans complain that the government doesn't do what we want, that a lot of times that is true. And the solution is not to destroy the government, but to actually craft a government that does what the people want. And then you can, and then the Democrats are bad at this too, because like we're focused on means testing and like jumping through as many hoops as possible and making it just making it as difficult as it can be to get the slightest bit of help. And that's why Republicans get away with it, and Republicans like purposefully try to sabotage stuff in the government all the time.
Yes.
They're not helping with that fashion. But when they come out and say, well, look, I sabotaged this program and it's not working, we need to get rid of it. But to your point of like, how would getting rid of like the EPA, it doesn't benefit anyone except for
Exxon.
businesses. Yeah, businesses that want to like, dump toxic waste into rivers. Like that's it. That's the only thing it benefits. And you ever hear like libertarians talk about, well, this will unleash the free market, and this will
obsessed.
It's so stupid. It's so incredibly stupid. I was like, whenever I talk to libertarians about this, is like, you want to go somewhere where there's no government like regulations on building codes or anything like that, go to Somalia. Like, go to Somalia and tell me how it looks over there. That's what you're going to end up with. I remember when I was in Jordan, and I remember seeing these guys putting together like a chain link fence, and they had like a welder. They had a welder, and they were welding together this metal. And they didn't have glasses on. They didn't have like a cover for their face and everything. Sparks were flying everywhere. And I'm sure that saved a lot of money. But those guys are going to be blind in 5 years. It's like, there's a reason we don't do that, because it's like you want a school to collapse whenever we have an earthquake. Like, that's the world these guys are looking for. But they've deluded themselves into thinking that they'll craft some utopia if we just, let people do whatever the hell they want. It's weird.
I want to address that here, really quickly. It is unbelievable to me that the answer to something being wrong is to just destroy it.
Right.
Like, look, no, I understand it from a standpoint of this. We see time over time again, year over year, administration after administration, we want things to change. People tell us things are going to change, then they don't change. We're all pissed off about this. Like, you're not alone in being pissed off about this. But as much as I think that like just tearing it all down, feels really euphoric, what does that look like? Truthfully speaking, all right, because I got to tell you, the government really isn't a problem. The government is made up of people. It's not that the government doesn't function. It's that the people who are currently in the government are incapable of, putting something out there that we need and want. What we really need to be seeing here is just having better people in these positions. That's what we really need at the end of the day in order for these things to function correctly. And obviously that sounds like, well, if that was going to happen, it would have happened already. But, I think there's a lot of impediments in the way. And this is not really one of those like, simple conversations. But I'll ask this in response to some of the libertarian arguments, like, hey, well, if we just have less government, then, the free market will take over, the utopia will spring up, everything will be perfect. The free market, capitalism. Under what circumstance has capitalism ever really responded in an ethical way, ever, to anything?
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. Its sole focus, its sole function is to provide endless amounts of more. That's all it does. Yeah. Endless amounts of more. And the only way that you can have endless amounts of more is to consistently be cutting things and cutting things and cutting things. And there is no regard for safety. There's no regard for, making sure that there's like healthy competition. I mean, we essentially, if you really want to be honest with yourself, we're almost at that utopia that libertarians already want to, because capitalism is in complete control of everything. And there is no limits to what they're willing to do. And the material conditions of people around the world keep worsening. So I don't know what you think would change other than what we essentially already have. Do you honestly believe that government is actually restricting the free market currently? Because honestly, the government really more or less works for the corporations at this point.
Yeah, in fact, it disincentivizes you to take care of people and to take restrictions and to have safety requirements. And I like to say that the how do I put it? The better you are at being a person, the worse you are at being a capitalist, and vice versa. Like the worse person you are, the better capitalist you are, because it's all about cutting people's throats and getting what you can at whatever cost. And it's just wild. I don't understand. Like it can't. It's funny. It's really funny to me when libertarians say, "Well, you know, socialism looks good on paper, but it can't function in life." Because, buddy, libertarianism doesn't even look good on paper. It looks like dog shit on paper. Very obviously, like you can think about it 5 seconds and the entire thing falls apart. Like there's a reason there's no libertarian societies on planet Earth. There's a reason. Like it can't possibly exist. You're just hoping. It's also funny too. There's like, well, you know, we can't have, you know, these social programs because people are selfish, but we should have corporations. They won't be selfish. Like that won't happen. Like it can't, it's just, God, it's so weird. I don't understand. Like there's just no thought process to it.
There really isn't. I think the last thing I want to mention here is that like the libertarian philosophy is built on this belief that if you just leave people alone, that they'll just act more ethically than they would have if there was something policing them. And yet these are the same people that swear up and down that we need the police, because if they weren't around, then people would just not act ethically. And so it's just like,
well, a lot of libertarians would say that we can get rid of the police and everyone can just have their private police. And like that's their solution. Like warring states is their solution. That's what they want to go for. And the funny thing to me is that they say, well, we need to get rid of the government and then we'll have, you know, just businesses and people interact with each other. Buddy, I got news for you. They will form a government. Like a corporation acts like a government. It has rules, it has regulations, it has standards. There are things you can do, things you can't do. Like you're just swapping one boss for the other, except one boss is a king, like your CEO, and the other boss is someone that you can vote for and actually have a part in the process. And like it's libertarianism is astrology for dudes. That's what it is. Like it's complete absolute nonsense, but you know, they believe it anyway.